Good afternoon. We are here for an agenda review. Today's date is December 7th, 2023. We're here to review the agenda for the December 14th, 2023 meeting. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Fast. Aye. Commissioner Myers.
Myers, aye.
Commissioner O'Hara.
Here.
Commissioner Hanslick.
Hanslick here.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
Here.
Commissioner Allenbrand.
Allenbrand, aye.
And Chairman Kelly.
Aye, all are present. Would the clerk read item number 1, please?
Consider approving the November 16th, 2023 business session minutes.
Any questions? Would the clerk read item number 2, please?
Consider authorizing a contract renewal for federal appropriations and regulatory representation with the Ferguson Group for a one-year period in an amount not to exceed $96,000, with an option to renew the contract for one remaining one-year period, and authorizing the county manager to execute the contract on behalf of the board.
Mr. Dapp is here with us to discuss this matter. Mr. Dapp, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Mark Dapp, Budget and Financial Planning. This is a one-year renewal with the Ferguson Group, who you're familiar with from the Committee of the Whole last week, who provides our federal representation. The original contract was entered into last year. It was a one-year term with 2 one-year renewals. This is authorization to enter into the second year of that renewal. The price that is being proposed is consistent with the previous contract amount, and this would extend our representation through November 17th of 2024.
All right, questions on this? Commissioner Hanslick?
Thank you. I was just going to say, I think that the ROI on this is self-evident, and I look forward to our continuing to work with them. I sleep better at night knowing they are scanning all the time for grant opportunities, and that we're not missing anything. So I think keeping us on consent makes sense.
Commissioner Ashcraft?
I have no objections to that. I wanted to thank Mr. Dapp and the Ferguson Group. They very much tried to show the ROI, whether you agree with it or disagree with it. That's definitely appropriate, and I appreciate it.
Commissioner Allenbrand?
Thank you, Chair. I was going to say the same thing. This needs to go on consent, and if you just look at the money that we've received on the town, I know the staff had involvement with it. We've had relationships, but I think it's key.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Dapp. Item number 3, please.
Resolution number 105-23, consider amending the resolution 048-22 to ensure that the Johnson County Opioid Settlement Fund aligns with the requirements of the 2023 Kansas House Bill number 2082.
Cindy Dunham from Legal is here on this one. Welcome.
Thank you. Cindy Dunham, Legal Department. This is item is a procedural matter to align the county's a current opioid litigation settlement fund with legislation that was passed earlier this year. Last year, the board created the litigation settlement fund for the opioid litigation, and since then, the legislature has created passed a House Bill 2082, which provides for a statutory restricted fund, and all we want to do is do a very simple amendment to go from a special reserve fund to this statutory restricted fund.
Procedural matter, any questions? All right, thank you, Ms. Dunham. Number 4, please.
Consider authorizing a contract renewal for lobbying services with Federico Consulting Incorporated for a 12-month period and an annual amount not to exceed $73,500, with and authorizing the county manager to execute the contract on behalf of the board.
Mr. Dapp, now down to the state level.
Mark Dapp, Budget and Financial Planning. This item is a one-year renewal with Federico and Durst. Just for a bit of background, this original contract was awarded in 2019. We do have the option for a 2-year renewal as part of the current contract amount, but what we are proposing is a 1-year renewal at this time with the intention to go back out for RFP in the summer of 2024 to regauge the market and the interest at that time. It would also be 5 years since that original contract was awarded. The intention at that point would be then to sign a 2-year contract renewal so that we would align our state representation with the legislative bienniums to actually give us an option when those contracts are up if it would be viable to potentially change providers.
Is there any concern to doing that in the summer of the biennium cycle, not knowing the composition of the House and Senate?
I think in the election year, when all 165 of them next year, will be a bit of a transition, but it will align us moving forward to do 2-year contract periods so that when we do have that turnover from bienniums, it would allow us the opportunity to potentially switch representation if we chose to do so.
Okay. Commissioner Ashcraft and Commissioner Allen-Brand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Dapp, I agree with the strategy. It would be nice if there were some similar ROI arguments presented with this contract concern. I know of their presentation, but sometimes I like to be able to study and understand. So if that's possible before next week, that'd be great. I'm okay with it staying on consent. I'm not asking to pull it.
Commissioner Allen-Brand.
I too think, they have proven, again, just even with the crisis center and the money that will come in there, I mean, they more than pay for themselves. So if you want to do that, if you want to do it, I think this stays on consent, so I'm happy with it.
Commissioner Fast.
So was it 65,000, the original contract, so they've gone up 6,000?
Correct. They've gone up 10%.
Okay.
That original contract amount was from 2019.
Okay, I just couldn't remember.
Commissioner Hanslick.
Thank you. I'm fine with this staying on consent, but I do want to emphasize the conversation we'd had when the Federico staff was here, that we'd really appreciate heads up when things are anticipated to come, and knowing that's not always possible. But I hope they will bear that in mind as we move into the next legislative session, that to the extent possible, we'd like to have some heads up so that we can put that, we can respond ahead of time and have some input into that. So, thank you.
Phone calls returned.
Commissioner Fast.
Yeah, and I've talked to you about this, that in our next contract is to let my colleagues know about conflicts of interest in lobbying groups. We might be advocating for Medicaid expansion, but the lobbyist has a client, advocating to not expand, and that, that we really communicate that there's not, that how we work these conflicts. I know you never can be pure, but.
Certainly.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Dapp. All right. Item number 5, please.
Resolution number 106-23 and resolution number 107-23. Application numbers W23-356-REZ-GA and W23-357-PP/FP-GA. Consider request from Mark and Mary Sutton, applicants and landowners, for a rezoning from PRU 1B and RUR to PRU 1B, preliminary and final plat, which shall serve as the preliminary and final development plans, one plat exception and one minimum infrastructure waiver for one lot residential lot to be known as Casper Commons, located at 15360 Lake Road, 10th Street, Gardner Township.
Michelle Leininger is here from planning to discuss this item. Welcome.
Good afternoon. I almost said evening. Not quite there yet. This is one of our applications that we've seen similar out at Gardner Lake, where they're looking to assemble platted lots with a lake parcel. The same situation. This is on the east side of the lake. Here's a zoning map that shows the lakeside parcels are zoned RUR once they're sold to the property owner, and the platted properties are zoned for single-family residential. So we're assembling those for the same zoning district. Here's the preliminary plat with the existing structures. The one plat exception is for the existing structure and the side yard setback. The waiver is for the improvement to Gardner East Road to a type B collector. Staff is supportive of the waiver and the plat exception. The intent of the property owners is to at some point remove the single house and then rebuild one house on the structure or on the lot. The West Zoning Board recommended approval of this rezoning in preliminary final plat, and nobody spoke against or in favor of this item. And just to note, there are 2 motions for this project.
Thank you. Commissioner Allen-Brand.
I just have a question, so maybe, I mean, I don't need to bring it up now, but if we could talk before next week, thank you.
All right. See no other questions. This is a planning item. It'll remain on action. Would the clerk please read item number 6?
Resolution number 111-23 and resolution number 112-23, application numbers E 23-348-PP AU and E 23-349-CUP AU. Consider a request from Dan Finn, Phelps Engineering applicant, on behalf of Cogent Enterprises LLC landowners for a preliminary development plan for 4 lots on 67.07 acres and a conditional use permit for a soccer complex on 54.4 acres and for a 10-year term at 20305 Metcalf Avenue.
Michelle Leininger again. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Michelle Einer, County Planning staff. This is for a preliminary plat, preliminary development plan, and a conditional use permit for a soccer complex. Before I go into the details of the project, I just wanted to give you an upfront summary of the recommendations so far. Staff did recommend approval of the applications. The East Zoning Board recommended denial of the applications, and at this point, the applicant has requested that the items be remanded back to the Zoning Board for reconsideration. Staff is in support of the remand also. Again, this is a vicinity map of the property. It's outlined in blue. It's a large parcel, 67 acres. The intent is for 4 lots, with lot 1 being the indoor-outdoor sports complex. Here's the zoning of the area. Something to note is that the property is currently zoned for industrial uses. The zoning is not proposed to change and has been zoned such since prior to 1982, of which our records show to 1982. The permitted uses in this district include warehouse, manufacturing, assembly, research facilities. To the north are residential developed and zoned property, along with some commercial development and zoning. To the west is zoned for rural and uses crop agriculture. And then the property to the south is Griffin Industrial Park, which is zoned for industrial. And then to the east, across the railroad tracks, is Stillwell Park. This is the proposed plat with just the lots outlined so that you can see the large lot 1 is where the proposed CUP is located. Lot 2, there's an existing farmstead proposed to stay for this point in time. And then there is a tract A with the stormwater detention facility. There are 2 plat exceptions, both for existing and future driveways, which staff does support. This is the CUP area. It's approximately 48 acres, and then additionally the tract A area. It's existing PEC 3 zoning again, and the proposed use is an athletic facilities with a conditional use permit. The applicant did hold 2 neighborhood meetings as part of this process and has significantly changed the facility. Initially, the building and the 4 outdoor fields were located to the north, directly adjacent to the residential, and they pushed everything to the south. This is a close-up of the southern portion of the site. Outlined in blue is the proposed building. The green are the outdoor soccer fields. There's a warm-up area, associated parking, a playground, and a little utility restroom building next to the fields. Outdoor fields are proposed to be used for practice only, And the indoor fields will be used for practices, games, and tournaments on weekends only. No fixed seating outside, no public address system outside. And then 278 parking spaces are proposed. Staff is recommending that that be increased based on the traffic engineer's parking generation manual. Our regulations don't offer any parking standards for this type of use. The applicant provided traffic analysis for the project, and no street improvements are recommended as a result of the proposed improvements. Just highlight some items in here. There's landscaping. This is hedgerows on the north and on the east. The yellow are additional evergreen trees that are proposed to help with the required 75% screening between the different zoning districts. Here's just a picture of the hedgerow a few months ago. And then here's the tree line on the east side of the property adjacent to the railroad tracks. Here is a portion of the photometric plan. This is the building. The yellow dots are the proposed on-building lighting. They're downward directional and help with security and provide additional lighting to the drive aisles and parking around the building. Here is the lighting for the proposed fields. There are 11 poles that are shown in blue. They're proposed to be 70 feet tall with lights mounted both at 70 and 45 to light the fields and parking area. Again, these are proposed to be downward directional fixtures, and the closest light pole is located over 1,000 feet from the north property line. Their proposed plan do meet the performance standards for the zoning district, and the illumination requirement at the property line adjacent to residential is 0.4 foot candles, and they, based on their proposal, they are meeting that, actually exceeding it at 0 foot candles. Here's a visual the applicant proposed. These are actually pictures, they're not renderings, of a similar soccer complex with field lighting. Demonstrates how the lighting is, these are 70-foot poles. While they're tall, they're very concentrated to the fields with minimal spillage. So just a summary again, at the November 16th East Zoning Board meeting, staff recommended approval of both the application subject to stipulations, including a 10-year time frame, limits on times that the field lights can be on, and then adding some additional parking. 10 people did speak at the meeting, and a significant amount of written comments were provided. All of that is in your packet. Concerns were regarding potential lighting, traffic, noise issues. The comments varied from support to non-support, so there was a vast mix. The zoning board did recommend denial of both applications for the reasons of lighting for the project, the location of the project, the street infrastructure, and the proximity to Stillwell Park. There was a protest petition submitted for the project. However, it was determined to be not valid due to the petition not meeting the required signatures of 20% of the area of notification. And then there are 2 separate applications that need their own actions, and I can answer any questions.
Thank you, Michelle, and I appreciate the diligent report here. Tell me, or please remind us, what is this area currently zoned?
It is zone PEC 3, which is an industrial zoning district.
And so the plans here meet the standards for that zoning?
It does. Regarding lighting, setbacks, there's a peripheral boundary around the whole district. So we don't necessarily have any standards for athletic complexes, but it does meet the zoning district regulations.
In terms of the density that's here, this is actually probably less dense than your typical PEC 3 designation, is that right?
Staff would agree with that, yes. You could get manufacturing, you could get, basically, if you put it into perspective, all of the property around New Suttree Air Center is zoned PEC 3. So those similar uses, if deemed, if the property owners wanted to build those are the types of facilities that could go in.
Commissioner Allen Brand?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I know this is in Commissioner O'Hara's, but what gives me heartburn, being a former, working on planning commissions in Lenexa and also in Olathe, and a part of the American Planners Association, this meets all the criteria of this land use, and it concerns me when, and it looks like, I don't know whoever owns this, they had a couple neighborhood meetings. It could be a lot worse. I've actually been to the Gilbert, Arizona, coming from a granddaughter who's a soccer fanatic and does teams, and it's very well done. And so I feel like we have a responsibility here, and as a commission, that we have to, we need to follow the guidelines. So I think this does need to go back. And then I guess I would think there'd be some liability to us when it's zoned properly and they're doing everything properly, how we have the right to deny what they're doing. And I understand where their neighbors are coming from, but this is zoned properly. I could understand if it was coming back trying to be rezoned.
Well,
So,
I'll just remind you that while it's zoned industrial, this is a use that's not outright permitted in the district. It's permitted with a conditional use permit. So that does allow some flexibility in what goes on with that use. So, yes.
Ms. Leninger, I don't expect you to handle the questions of legality
Yeah.
regarding next steps, though there would be recourse if we were to deny this, as the zoning board did. There would be a potential for court intervention.
I would think
for
so.
the applicant. Commissioner O'Hara, then Commissioner Myers.
The lighting poles, they are the same height as what we have out on interstate highways, as far as approximately, are they about the same height?
I'm not sure what those pole heights are.
But, and does Stillwell doesn't have any, I mean, they are extremely concerned about outside lights. I mean, we had one yard light that has been in contention for 5 years, and finally, we got that settled. I mean, this is so far away from what has been allowed in Stillwell. I mean, lighting has been a huge issue for 40 years. And these light poles are really, really tall, 70 feet. And I believe that there was somewhere, someone said 48 feet was standard. This is just coming from my memory, but, and this is an intense use. We're going to have, what did you say you wanted to add? It was 278 parking spaces, and staff has recommended an increase of those parking spaces. So this is an intense use, way more intense than anything that has been out there. And the industrial development out there, there hasn't been any complaints, and it's been fine. But this is a deviation, especially on the lighting, and it's the zoning board brought up those concerns. So,
Commissioner Myers. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, could you expand on the proximity to Stillwell Park, what the concerns are?
The concern was the potential noise and potential light spillage. I know it's a park that is available for a variety of people. and accessibility, and so it being quiet was part of the draw. Also with the light spillage, but there is a significant railway with trees between the two.
So Union Pacific uses railway?
Oh, yeah, the picture that I showed, right here, there was a train going by.
Huge amount of noise, a lot more than a soccer park.
Yeah, so, that is pretty dense in there, and the applicant doesn't intend to to remove those trees and use them as kind of a protection to keep people away from the railroad tracks, and they're also proposing to put in a fence.
So all I can relate this to, from what I've seen, is it reminds me a lot of Mid-America West Sports Complex. That is kind of the same type of layout, industrial, railroad tracks.
Garmin.
They have lighting. It also, a lot of times these soccer parks are built even within a park setting, such as in Shawnee, Swarner Park would be soccer fields that are within the park itself. So I was just kind of not understanding the concern being next to Stillwell Park.
Real quick, Ms. Leninger, since lighting's been brought up more than once, can you give us a really high-level layman's understanding of foot candles?
Foot candles is what the industry, let me back up. As part of a site plan, development plan, we require what's called a photometric plan. And that shows where the lighting is, and the foot candles is the reading of illumination at specific points. So the idea is that you're not spilling your light illumination off your property. And so additionally, what helps with that is that downward directional requirement. You're not going to get, your old school football fields where the lights do this instead of do this.
So, for example, the height of the lighting doesn't necessarily have an impact on the foot candles, and therefore how light affects people in further distances away. You could have a 5-foot pole that doesn't have any kind of shading, any kind of directional, or any kind of direction, and it could have way more foot candles, way more of an impact than a 70-foot light that is directionally straight down, right?
There's a lot of things that come into play, and this is probably my limit of knowledge of lighting. This proposal has LED lighting, which is significantly different than what you see, the sodium and such. What that height allows them to do is to really focus and light up the area that's needed. A lot of times, if you go lower, the idea is you only put the lights as high as they need to be. And so their designers said that 70 foot is needed in order to light the fields appropriately for the activity, and in order to keep them downward directional. Yes, you could put lower lights in, but then you're looking at either more lights or you're looking at tipping them. So then you're going to see the lights and it's going to spill more. So they're really focusing them, and that helps with that spillage.
The number of foot candles, I think you said, was 0?
At the north property line. So the code requires 0 at the street, and which isn't an issue with this project, and 0.4 at any property line adjacent to residential. And they're far enough south in this piece of property that their foot candle readings at the north property line is 0.
Thank you. Commissioner Ashcraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a clarification question. The photo you showed, of the fields in Gilbert, it appeared to have a single array per pole, but I thought you mentioned that the one being proposed would have have 2 banks of light per pole?
There are a few along the parking lot that will have the 70-foot for the fields and the 45-foot mounted for the parking lots.
Thank you.
Commissioner O'Hara?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is this the first project in the Stillwell-Aubrey area that staff has recommended approval for this type of lighting?
I don't know that we've had any other applications with this type of lighting.
And I know that many, many years ago, KCP&L, they had come forward, I think with some soccer fields or something, and that was not approved, because this community has had a long-standing aversion to outdoor lighting like this. And so this is the first time that staff has recommended approval of this type of lighting, correct?
Since I've been here.
Okay.
I am not aware of the project that you're talking about.
And what was the reason, I mean, knowing the history of Stillwell and the issue of outdoor lighting and the desire to be basically a dark sky community, what was the criteria that you were looking at that you considered that this would be appropriate, knowing the long-standing aversion to the outside lighting?
We have minimal standards in our regulations that speak to lighting. It talks about them being downward directional. It also talks about the foot candles at some of the property lines. This proposal does meet those requirements that are in the code. Additionally, they have moved this facility further south on the property, so they're adjacent to residential, and the first light pole is over 1,000 feet from that. Also, with our stipulations, we proposed a stipulation that the field lighting shall only be on when the field is being used, so they're not going to just be on to be on. They may not be on for months because the sun sets so much later in the summer, but that they not be on when they don't need them, but they be off by 10.
And one follow-up. Never mind, I'll ask that next week.
You'll have the opportunity, because this will be on action, because it's a planning matter. So thank you very much, Ms. Leininger. All right, how about item number 7, please?
Resolution number WD 23-028. Conduct a public hearing and consider authorizing funds for the construction phase of the Mill Creek Wet Weather Storage Facility Project, MCR 1, Contract 25, in an amount not to exceed $36,519,000, increasing the total project authorization to $39,187,500, and consider entering into a cooperative land use agreement with Johnson County Park and Recreation District, and consider granting authority to the Johnson County Wastewater General Manager to execute necessary utility agreements.
Susan Pekarik from Wastewater's here. Welcome back.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So this project is one in which the board had previously authorized design and bid phase services. This is, the map on your screen here is the Mill Creek Regional Service Area. And the interceptor, which runs more or less down the middle of that watershed area, was originally designed to serve about half development in that area. And so a couple of years ago, we did a study to understand where we were in terms of the capacity of the existing interceptor. And we identified there are some areas that did need some capacity enhancements in order to, for wet weather flows. And so what was identified by the team, an optimal solution, which was to build a storage facility that's located here on the map, this little blue square here. And that saved us about $50 million, because otherwise we would have been paralleling our existing interceptor and down through the park area. It would have been a very disruptive project. So we've designed that project. It's gone out to bid. We have now our bids back. And so this is for construction phase funding. It also includes the property. Let me see here. I think we've got that here. So the property that the storage facility will be constructed upon is a property that we purchased from the Park and Rec Foundation of Johnson County. And we will also be accessing that site through Johnson County Park and Rec property. And so we have worked with them on agreement to access our facility there. We've also, a couple of other great things about this project are that we've also worked with them to include native plantings, since this is in the park area. You see the trail running along here, as well as we'll have an educational kiosk there along the trail as well to help educate folks about water quality. Burns & McDonnell will provide engineering construction phase services. They did design the project, and they were under contract to do services of this type under a term of supply contract. And then SCADA integration will be provided by R.E. Pedrati. We also have an existing contract with them to do that type of work. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Ms. Pekarik on this matter? Commissioner Myers.
Just because I'm from Shawnee and I need to ask this question for their assurance, no odor.
We will have an odor control system on this facility.
That's Leewood right now.
All right, any further questions? Comments? All right, public hearing remaining on action. How about number 8, please?
Invitation for bid, IFB number 2023-046. Consider authorizing a contract with Garney Companies Incorporated to construct the Mill Creek Wet Weather Storage Facility Project, MCR1, Contract 25, in the amount of $30,678,000.
Go ahead.
So Susan Pekarik again with wastewater. This is the companion item. The project was bid, and Garney was the low bidder. We received 6 bids on the project. The opinion of probable cost was about $41.5 million. That, as we've explained on previous projects, that's a opinion of probable cost is developed during the latter portions of design, so we can get an understanding of where we anticipate the cost to be. With the bid being $30.6 million, we're comfortable with that bid. And the design engineer also provided some input as to the differences in the cost, including things like different approaches that the contractors would take when it comes to dewatering the site, as well as how to best tie in this new structure into the existing infrastructure that's there. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner Myers.
We've worked with Garney Companies Incorporated.
We have worked with Garney before, yes.
Any questions, comments, objections to consent?
I have no objections. Just a reminder, it's all in Commissioner Myers' district.
Okay, let's put it there for now. Thank you so much.
Oh, you have to fund it first.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. It's a 1-2. We can't put the, I'm trying my best to give us a better week next week, but you'll be here,
I'll be here anyway.
and so we'll take a 1-2 approach.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Number 9, please.
Consider authorizing a $1 million investment of Olathe Home, HOME funds, and Habitat for Humanity of Kansas City's Pathway at Heritage Park Project, which will consist of 14 single-family homes in Olathe, Kansas, and authorizing the chairman to sign an agreement setting forth the terms and conditions of the investment.
Good afternoon, Heather McNeve, Housing Services Director. So today for your agenda review, I have an authorization for the $1 million of Olethe's home funds for the Habitat for Humanity of Kansas City Pathway at Heritage Park Project. This is 14 single-family homes at 159th and Black Bob. The homeowners will be selected by Habitat using their rigorous screening criteria. They must be at or below 80% of area median income for their household size to qualify. There's a 15-year affordability requirement for this, which will be protected via a loan agreement and a mortgage on the property. Habitat fundraised $2.5 million to support this project. They're also using their restore revenue of almost $950,000. This is 64% of the total project costs. This is a really innovative project for our county. This is the first use of home funds for homeownership support. This is the first official partnership with Habitat for Humanity of Kansas City. We're very lucky to have a developer like Habitat for Humanity approach us for a project. They have extensive experience with HUD home compliance as well as neighborhood stabilization programs. This is the first community land trust project for our community. The final plat for the project was approved by the Olathe Planning Commission on November 13th, and it was referred to the City Council of Olathe for final approval and acceptance of the dedication of land for public easements and public right-of-way. That passed unanimously on December 5th. Additionally, on December 5th, the City Council passed a resolution of support for their home dollars to go towards this project. Now, there's been some confusion about why a resolution of support was requested from the city, so I want to review that. Olathe deferred their CDBG entitlement status to HUD and joined the Johnson County CDBG Urban County, which also included the Home Consortium. By doing so, they do not receive their own awards. They're ineligible. So Housing Services manages the Home Consortium as lead entity and is ultimately responsible to HUD for compliance and management of the funds. We subgrant to the City of Olathe 23% of our annual award after set-asides. We have a cooperation agreement and memorandum of understanding that states the county agrees to approve the city's home projects provided they meet all federal requirements. In an effort to be a good partner and to be transparent, we asked for that resolution of support because this is the first time we're going to use home funds for this kind of an affordable homeownership project. That resolution was passed unanimously by the City Council of Olathe on December 5th. A copy of that resolution is in your packets. Future requests for home funds for this kind of a project would go through our competitive application process and a review by the Housing and Community Development Advisory Committee, and it will require city support. The project aligns with the Consolidated Plan's strategic priorities and goals. It furthers the board's housing priority established earlier this year and the work of the Housing Subcommittee along the housing continuum. This is the first affordable housing homeownership project that meets the homeownership goal of the continuum. Because of the schedule change today, Lindsay Hicks, the president and CEO of Habitat, is unable to be here. She had an unavoidable commitment, but she will be here next week for action. I will take questions or comments.
Thank you, Ms. McNeve.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ellenbrand.
Thank you, Chair. So just to reemphasize, this is, Olathe has already, their elected officials have already voted in support, and this is their funds to go towards this project, and this is what they've chosen.
Correct.
For those funds to go to. Thank you.
Commissioner O'Hara.
However, I think that they were a little cranky because in the original application, it indicated that Olathe had already given their permission to use that $1 million in home funds on that application that they sent to us. And that's my concern is that the original application to us, the information on it was not accurate, and that's very concerning. But as far, do you know what the percentage, if a person helps, they're putting a lot of sweat equity into these homes, correct?
Correct.
And then at a future date, they decide that they need to move, they have a job that they're moving to someplace else. What is the percentage of the equity that they get?
That might be a question for Lindsay Hicks next week, but I believe it's 25% of the appraised.
Yeah, okay. So I mean, I understand the goal and the of home ownership, but this really is, I mean, it's a percentage. it's a percentage of home ownership, and they have sunk a lot of hours into the construction of this. And then I believe that for the maintenance that there's, Lindsay told me that, and I'm going on memory, I think it's between $50 to $100 a month for maintenance that they have, that they have a fund that is funded by monthly payments. And also, the lots that the houses are setting on, they do not pay property tax. Is that correct?
The land trust, the property itself, the land is held in trust and it's exempt from property taxes, but the structures will be subject to
Correct.
property.
Yeah, the structure is taxed, but not the land.
That's the point of the community land trust, yes.
Right. And so I was just thinking in my mind, what would prevent a nonprofit like a homeowners association having the ownership of lots in a subdivision and them not paying property taxes because it's a nonprofit?
It's a nonprofit, it's heavily subsidized to keep it affordable. There's income restrictions and
Yes,
yeah.
yes. But I mean, it was just a thought that went through my head. And I think that there's 12 building sites. Is that correct?
There's going to be 14 homes.
14.
Yes.
And the original plan, wasn't there like 30?
I believe when this came forward in June for SLFRF consideration, there were 20 homes. It's now 14 homes.
Okay, so they have pared it back.
That's correct.
All right. I just think, and I've mentioned this to Lindsay, that they need to be very careful in the future to make sure that they are filling out their applications correctly and not making assumptions and saying that they have home funds from whatever city before that action has been taken. All right, thank you.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner O'Hara, part of the confusion was the schematic that went out showed, I believe, 30-something structures. So it just kind of added to the confusion, but I think we're past that. But Ms. McNee, I appreciate your work. I've got a number of questions. I'm getting any number of questions from constituents, so I'd like to visit with you in depth before next week.
Wonderful.
Commissioner Hanslick.
Yes, thank you. And thank you so much, Ms. McNeve, for sending me a list of frequently asked questions about this property. And I think one of the things that a lot of people have been writing to us about is concerns about the impact on their property values. And I think it's important to mention that homes in a land trust, excuse me, cannot be used for an appraisal comp for a real estate transaction outside of the land trust. So the development will not have any impact on home values. Excuse me, and there will be infrastructure, sidewalks, streetlights will be installed, and these are 14 single-family homes that are detached, and they align with the current zoning requirements and range from 1,400 to 2,400 square feet. And so hopefully that helps with some of the concerns that we've been getting, and really appreciate your providing that information.
Yeah, and thank you, and I won't relitigate the entire process since we've been through it once before, but just to say, it's an innovative approach. There will be more property taxes paid on the property than it's currently being paid because of the structure. And in terms of equity, of what people can gain here, 25% is greater than zero. So it's a helpful tool in the toolkit, and I look forward to seeing it again next week. All right, thank you, Ms. McNeve. We were on item number 9, so now we're on item number 10, please.
Request for a proposal, RFP number 2023-040. Consider authorizing a professional service agreement with Newmark Zimmer to provide commercial real estate brokerage services for the buildings located at 600 New Century Parkway and 561 Sumner Way, New Century, Kansas, for a one-year term with the option to renew 4 additional one-year terms.
Brian Johnson from the airport is here. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, Commissioners and staff. The Johnson County Airport Commission, I guess it was back in the spring, decided to take some strategic thinking or strategic planning to put forward a plan to pivot from the current brokerage firm to what is in front of us today, and that is the firm of Newmark Zimmer. It's really a way of getting a fresh look. I think anytime an organization such as the Johnson County Airport Commission decides to pivot, it's because they've realized that there's some other opportunities perhaps with another firm that will gain more traction, that will help market the facility. And in this case, we're talking about the Building 600, the CenturyLink building, and that associated property. So there was just a revitalization, if you will, and this is what is before you today. It's essentially structured in the same way. So essentially the numbers, when you look at whether it's a lease or a sale transaction, the structure is the same, the fees are the same. It's just a rinse and repeat, but with a new robust, hopefully a new robust firm that will accelerate our interest as an airport commission as well as a body here with the county board.
Mr. Johnson, thank you. Commissioner Hanslick.
Yes, thank you for the information. So am I to assume that the previous/current firm chose not to apply? Because according to the briefing sheet, it just says that one responsive proposal was received. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
Mr. Johnson, why 5 years? Why 1 + 4? What's the thought process there?
Yeah, that's a good question. And again, I'll have to really defer to purchasing, I think, to be able to answer that question. I was not part of the original dialogue. That's how it came to me. And I'd like to, if it's all right with you, Chairman, I'd like to have Robin Lyons come up and offer her thought.
Robin Lyons, welcome.
Good afternoon, Robin Lyons, Purchasing Manager. It just falls in line with most of our other contracts. Certainly, if they're not performing, we don't have to renew. There are cancellation clauses in it.
Thank you.
All right. Objection to consent on this? Okay, let's see it there. Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you.
All right, number 11, please.
Consider authorizing the Aging and Human Services Department to add one FTE CARE coordinator position to assist in administering the client assessment, referral, and evaluation program that will be funded by the Kansas Department for Aging and Disability Services, and authorizing the reallocation and expenditure of fiscal year FY 2024 general fund reserves in the amount of $80,200.
Welcome back, Tim. You having a good afternoon?
Yeah. Tim
Tim
Wolf,
Wolf.
Aging and Human Services. Thank you, Chairman and Commissioners. So I'm before you today asking for you guys to authorize the one full-time position for a care coordinator. The care coordinator, the care program is the client assessment, referral and evaluation program, and that's the mandated program that anybody going into a Medicaid-approved or Medicaid-certified nursing facility in the state of Kansas has to have a care assessment completed. State statute requires that the Area Agency on Aging perform those assessments, and I'm not sure exactly when, but up until 2012, the Department of Aging and Human Services had a care coordinator, and then in 2012, the state, so KDADS, decided they were taking back responsibility for the care program, and at that time, they eliminated the care coordinator positions across the state. Fast forward 10 years, toward the end of 2022, we being the Kansas Association for the Area Agencies on Aging, we started having conversations with KDADS because they had determined that they needed to give responsibility of the care program back to the AAAs due to some plans that they had to meet. They had some issues that had been identified, so their plan of action was to start giving responsibilities back. Initially, They were going to give us everything back by June of 2023, and so we rushed around to try to get a position approved and through the process here with our Personnel Review Committee. That did transpire. At the time that that happened, then the state said, okay, we need to put our brakes on a little bit, and we're just going to transition stuff to you slowly. So there have been responsibilities that have been given back to us. Our workload, if you were to ask my eligibility and options staff who are responsible for doing the assessments, it has really increased rapidly. I've been very fortunate enough that the care coordinator we had back in 2012, at the time they got rid of that position, she became an information referral specialist, so she's still been with us. The problem is that she has continued to do the care coordinator responsibilities for the last year, actually before that, but more so in the last year, to try to help keep us above board. And so what we're asking for is the authorization to be able to have a coordinator that can actually work with the state, make sure that the care assessments are being assigned, that the training, the responsibilities that the state is wanting us to do is met at this point. In July, we worked with KDADS and for the first time was able to get a statewide rate for the care assessments, which is $188 per assessment. We're still in the process of trying to get that raised. But for the majority of the 11 AAAs, that was an increase in funding. So with the funds that they pay per assessment, we average right now, I say the average is about 110. Last month, we were upwards of 140 that we actually assigned, and so it's just continuing to increase. And so the funding that we receive from the state will pay for this position, so there's no request from the county for additional funding. So at this time, I can stand for questions.
Mr. Wolf, thank you. So just to reiterate those last points, you're asking for an authorization of general fund reserves, but the amount that will cover the cost of this would be the care assessments that are reimbursed at a rate of $188 per agreement. So it's not allocating a new position based on reserves, but there's an independent funding source. I'm sure Commissioner Ashcraft has some intervening questions and would like to meet with you during the week to discuss them.
Well, I was hoping just to ask them now, but.
Hey, whatever works for you, sir.
Well, what happens if KDADS in the future decides to stop funding it?
The CARE program is Kansas's response to a federal mandate that we have to do this. And so
So once federally funded, always federally funded?
no, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I don't foresee that in the near future because this is a requirement that all states have to have in order to meet that Medicaid certified nurse.
And how will you be measuring success?
How do we measure the success of the program?
Yes.
It's making sure that we're getting the care assessments done and working with the state to ensure that individuals are entering nursing facilities or being approved for nursing facilities that need those on a timely manner.
I'd be interested in seeing your metrics.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner Allen Brand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, it is a state recommendation, and, it's a state mandate that we do this, and I never could figure it out because every healthcare, being in the business that I was in, you had to do a care assessment.
Yes.
And you had to turn those in, so to me, it's just duplicated, but we need to do it. And so I was wondering, can we put this on consent, or do we have to vote on it?
No. I was a part of the original care assessment pilot, and I need to, there's like drive time, and there originally wasn't included in this, and I think this might need to be in our legislative agenda, but I need to talk to you more. Because I mean, there's going to be a lot of costs that are going to be transferred on us, so I need to know more.
So you want it on action?
Yeah.
We'll see it there. Thank you, Mr. Wolf.
Thanks.
All right, item number 12, please.
Consider authorizing the allocation of opioid settlement funds received from the Kansas Municipalities Fights Addiction Fund in the amount of $617,368 for the purpose of treatment, combating, and educating the community about the opioid epidemic.
Julie Cairns, the Deputy County Manager, is here to discuss this item. Welcome.
Thank you. I have a few slides, and we have Tanner's going to pinch hit for Tim Deweese, who had to step out for another obligation. Then, of course, I have Becky Jones, who's going to round out this very brief presentation. So as you recall, back in 2019, the board authorized retention of special counsel to file a lawsuit to participate in damages sustained by Johnson County. We joined in 2021 in a memorandum of understanding with a number of folks with regard to the distribution of ultimately the settlement funds that would be received. You might recall from when we presented and discussed this back in, I believe, June, that our current estimate is that Johnson County will receive $10.1 million over 17 years. There's a lot that's still happening within this settlement. There's bankruptcies, there's continued litigation. So I'll point out first that so far we've received $1.6 million between 2022 and 2023. But that we recommended to the board that we took an approach where we smoothed the total anticipated revenues from the settlement over the 17 years and looked to program $600,000 annually. Back in June, the board took the action to appropriate $100,000 annually to the JOCO Recovery and Prevention Coalition to forward their efforts, and $100,000 annually to the UCS to fund grant opportunities in the region. And UCS just last week brought forward their proposed distribution of those dollars, which the board did approve. In a moment, I'm going to ask Tanner to talk about the efforts of the Recovery and Prevention Coalition. But first, just wanted to mention that at the time, back in June, we did ask permission to do a special budget process to allocate the distribution for 23 and 24 within the departments that have been participating in this process, and that after this open budget allocation, that we would program the dollars as part of the annual budget process. So with that, I'd like to ask Tanner to cover a couple of slides to give a status update on how their coalition is working.
Tanner Fortney from Mental Health. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman. Tanner Fortney, Mental Health. So regarding the Johnson County Prevention and Recovery Coalition, so as you can see on the slide, we had a group of community stakeholders that came together in March of 2022 to start tackling the concerns related to the opioid and fentanyl crisis that we've been seeing throughout Johnson County and the United States. And today that coalition has grown quite dramatically to include a lot of diverse groups, including healthcare providers, first responders, the sheriff's offices involved, as well as a number of others. And there's even been folks that have joined that have had either lived experiences related to this or they've been affected because their loved ones have. So it's really been a group of anybody in the community that would really like to come together. And that group has done a number of different things, including preparing a community assessment report to identify a lot of the local conditions and help to guide where our priorities go in the future with this. And they've identified 5 different work groups that I have listed there, which are the prevention and education, the trauma and root causes, harm reduction, treatment and recovery supports. And then some of the recent projects that they have in place right now, there's 5 that I'll go through and touch on briefly. The first is their fentanyl awareness campaign called You Never Know, that's in partnership with our Keeping It Clean campaign that we have at Mental Health. We work with a company on that called Overflow that develops a lot of the material. That's the same company we've contracted with in the past for the Zero Reasons Why campaign, which I think you all are familiar with. Also in April of next year, they're going to be hosting a half-day opioid symposium to be able to highlight some of the work they've done and get a lot of information out to the public on other future things that we need to be addressing with that coalition. Third is they're looking at leveraging the OD map data for targeting the naloxone distribution. And if you're not familiar with the OD map, that is a tool that's run through the Washington-Baltimore High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area Coalition, or consortium, I guess I should say rather. And that's been opened up to government agencies, both at the federal, state, and local level throughout the government, so that we can look almost in real time at fentanyl overdoses and opioid overdoses that are occurring. And we do use that on our prevention team, and other parts of Johnson County government use that as well. And it allows us to look to be able to see if we start to see peaks, spikes, for example, if you will, in certain areas of the county, like perhaps we might see something happening in the northeast that's a big spike in fentanyl overdoses. That helps us to guide where we can look at getting naltrexone injections or naloxone injections in order to be able to help to counter the effects of that. Fourth, they're looking at the post-overdose care kits for communities that we're distributing through the Olathe Police Department that helps to give individuals that have experienced that, their families, more education, as well as actual naloxone doses that they can use in the events of emergency to reverse the effects of fentanyl. And last but certainly not least is the Good Samaritan legislation regarding opioid overdoses, where they're pushing that legislation so that when individuals that are there trying to be there in the nick of time to help someone who's might be overdosing on fentanyl, that they would not be held liable for what the consequences may be to that person. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Julie.
So what we had looked to do while leveraging the $100,000 to UCS and the $100,000 to the coalition you just heard an update for, we wanted to look to see what our current departments had for more immediate needs, focused on one-time budget requests through this special process. And so next I'm going to invite Becky Jones to come up, who was responsible for heading up that process for us.
So in 2023 and 2024, as Julie mentioned, there was $600,000 allocated per year in 2023 and 2024. So we did not spend anything or allocate anything in 2023. So that actually gives us $1.2 million to allocate in 2024. So what we did is we convened a group of key stakeholder departments for Department of Mental Health, Department of Health and Environment, Sheriff, MedAct, District Attorney, District Court, the CMO's office, Financial Management, and the Budget Office. We submitted, or the department submitted proposals, and this committee reviewed those proposals. They are included in your packet for the detailed information. We high level included all of the dollar amounts on the screen. The departments are here if you have any specific questions. Also, Cindy Dunham in the county's legal office reviewed all of the proposals for eligibility in addition to the committee. And so we're recommending the $617,000 in addition to the $200,000 that's already been approved by the board, for a total of $817,000. I would also remind the board that this is a separate fund, as Cindy Dunham came forward earlier. This is a separate fund, and it's statutorily required. So all revenues and expenditures are included in that fund. So this is not part of the general fund or any other special funds.
Ms. Jones, thank you very much. And Ms. Karen, thank you as well. Quick question, Ms. Jones, if you don't mind, in terms of the individual requests from various departments, were all that were requested approved? I appreciate.
Yes, they were. Yes,
So I guess you don't get what you don't ask for, right?
That's correct.
And good on you for asking. My question is, were other departments who have first responders, say park police? I know, and I appreciate, Ms. Cairns, when we had talked about this earlier, we wanted, it was a priority that I had, and I think others had, to make sure we get Narcan available to those who are going to be in situations where they can save a life by utilizing that Narcan. And I'm glad that there's prioritization for MedAct and for the Sheriff's Office for Narcan. What about others that might be in a situation where they could utilize Narcan, like Parks Police, for example? Have we considered other places where Narcan might be a benefit, especially here as we're facing a opioid crisis within our country?
Yeah, so I think that the Parks Police was probably an oversight on our part when we looked to put this group of interested stakeholders together. We've since engaged with Jeff Stewart to see if there's anything that he needs. Clearly, we have some dollars that are remaining from what we had intended to allocate, so we'll continue to spread the word. We had that $1.2 million available. We've only thus programmed 817, so if we find additional opportunities, we will bring them before the board.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Commissioner O'Hara, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm thrilled that that the board is acknowledging the fentanyl crisis, because this is just unbelievable what is happening in our county. The sheriff continues to update us on that, and so I'm very supportive that we are keeping these funds within Johnson County government and not sending them out to other organizations. I applaud the staff for doing that. And with the $400,000 that's left, is there any specific project that maybe that entire amount could be put towards instead of putting this out in smaller increments?
So one project has not yet been identified, and the thought process is we wanted the coalition in particular to begin their work within the community to identify what will be our longer-term strategies. So the items that we brought forward for you today are shorter-term strategies, immediate needs within our departments. We wanted to give that group a time to begin their work, and I imagine they'll be making future requests for us.
I appreciate that consideration, given we don't know how the opioid crisis will continue to impact our communities, and how we might be able to leverage available resources with other resources and strategies throughout the metropolitan region, and how we address the crisis, because we don't stand alone with the wall around us in this circumstance. So I appreciate that strategy. Commissioner Myers, then Hanson.
Yeah, could you expand on mail scanners and what the purpose of the mail scanners?
Certainly, I'd like to invite the Sheriff's Office up to expand upon that.
Good afternoon, Chairman. Good afternoon, council members. County Commissioners, I'm sorry. Daryl, it's been a long day. Daryl Reese, Under Sheriff. I also have with me today Captain Wade. He was in charge of the project, so he'll be answering the questions on the mail scanners, if you don't mind, and I'll let him talk about that.
Good afternoon, Doug Wade. The mail scanner is a device that allows us to scan like mail, legal mail, and it will detect if there's powder inside of it, if it's been soaked with some type of a liquid, so that we know whether or not that piece of mail has been contaminated. When we put this together, there's a prison intelligence group of the states that participated. There's 13 states that are dealing with drugs coming in through legal mail. And legal mail, you know, it has to be open and inspected in front of the inmate. So this will help.
Can you talk?
Oh, I'm sorry. Sure.
Thank you.
The scanner will allow us to detect if there's something in there before we actually give it to the inmate. When we did this, holy cow. When we did this back in February, we actually the jail rejected 51 pieces of mail in one day because it had been contaminated or had stickers on it, stuff that they could not tell for sure was not contaminated. So this will help us identify, and if I assume you guys got the same email that Joe Waters sent out back in June, where politicians across the state had received mail that had some type of powder in it, this scanner would allow us to scan that stuff and say, yep, there is definitely something in there. It can kind of narrow down to what type of contaminant it is. It also has the ability to contact this company immediately. They can go in, look at what you've scanned, and they can tell you pretty much exactly what you're looking at.
So these mail scanners would be only for sheriff's department use, or county mail as a whole, or I'm wondering if we need to have additional mail scanners for the same purpose as a sheriff's department.
My recommendation it would be that you guys have one, and even the courts have one, because the courts get so much mail.
Right.
That it could be scanned.
The impetus behind the mail scanner here and its inclusion, the downdraft table as well,
right.
Face masks, it's all a sequence for mail that is attempting to potentially smuggle drugs into the prison.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
And so it's not necessarily just a safety issue for the intended recipient, but to try to intercept narcotics that otherwise could go into the prison and cause all kinds of trouble.
Correct. We're actually going down on the 13th to KDOC, Topeka, where this company is coming out and doing a demonstration to KDOC of how this system works. So again, everybody's kind of dealing with this. It protects the inmates, protects the officers who have to deal with the mail. So we're trying to prevent that from actually getting into the facility.
So relatively state-of-the-art. Do you know if other facilities or the jails across the metro region are utilizing similar technology?
That I don't know. I know there's several in California that are using it.
Federal government.
But I don't know if anybody else around us is.
Okay.
There's two other counties in Kansas are looking at it right now. One of them is Sedgwick County, and I can't remember where the other one is, but they're both looking at that because it's a problem that jails and prisons are seeing. And I would just, you asked the question about, do you recommend them? This is just my opinion. I would recommend them for the courthouse, and I would recommend them for any time you get mail over here.
Thank you. Commissioner Hanslick?
Excuse me, thank you. I have a question, actually, it's probably more for Tanner Fortney, but I do have a question for the sheriff's representatives. I recently talked to someone who is a rep for a company that sells it's some kind of a spray that she said they use it inside of buses that gets rid of any fentanyl residual that might be, in a bus or where someone sat down. Is that something we should be looking at? It was totally new information to me. I'd never heard of such a thing.
The sheriff's office has looked at several companies that do that or say they do that. We've sent that stuff to our lab to be tested, and we're just waiting for the results.
Oh, okay, so you're looking into that kind of a thing. All right, great, thank you. And then my question for Mr. Fortney is, what's the best source of information if we want to learn more about the impact of fentanyl and the status actually of perhaps other drugs in Johnson County? We'd had I think it was a study session, I don't know how long ago that was, with Kevin Kufelt, and that was really helpful. Could we have something like that again? Or is there another source of information you might direct us to?
Well, we certainly could. Mr. Kufelt, you're right. He does a fantastic job, I think, presenting on all that information. You can also go on the slide. We also have the Johnson County Prevention and Recovery Coalition website that you can go to, and they have some information there as well.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Commissioner Allenbrand, Commissioner Ashcraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm in agreement with all this, but I do appreciate Chair bringing up the park police. I think if Ms. Carnes in the future could look at that, and Myers must have been asleep at the wheel because I'm surprised.
They already had.
They already have it?
Yes. That's my understanding.
And that's correct. We did confirm with Jeff's, but as far as like resupply or involving them within the work group we've created, that was a miss. And so he will be included as we move forward, because we intend to continue to meet quarterly to compare notes and make sure that we're meeting the needs in this area.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Cairns, here's my concern. Back in '98, there was a huge tobacco settlement. Money just flowed into the states and communities. And it didn't take long until those funds were bled off into all sorts of activities. And I've raised this issue before. I'd like to know what our plan is and how these expenditures and future expenditures are attacking the underlying issues of opioid and fentanyl. The individual projects are fine, but that doesn't get to the root issue, or maybe it does. I just don't see it in the briefing sheet. So if you could visit with me and set me straight before next week, I would appreciate it.
Certainly, but if I could also add, we believe that is going to be the work of the coalition that Tanner spoke to, that's going to be the vehicle through which the county will be looking to do the combating and preventing of the issue.
I hope so, but you've got almost $1 million here, and I'm just, I'm trying to understand how it all works, or you hope it will work.
He needs help.
Will do.
I need help.
I'm sorry. I might as well ask this because I don't know. I should know the answer, but what is the shelf life of Narcan?
Well, that's a good question. Excuse me.
They're recommending 90 to 120 days, depends on the maker of it. What we had planned on doing, if we have any left over, when it's getting ready to expire, give it to MedAct, because MedAct uses it a lot faster than most agencies do, and that's how we keep the shelf life up.
And that was my question, well, kind of a concern, but this is going to be ongoing expense.
And it usually takes, just so people know it, one deal of Narcan doesn't always work just one dose of it, so sometimes you have to give somebody 2 or 3 doses.
Thank you. So to answer, partially answer Commissioner Ashcraft's question on how to combat fentanyl is secure the border.
Well,
It's not our job.
Johnson County, Kansas is not going to secure the border, but
Let's
we're
not
not
go
going
there.
to get into
Missouri?
that politics.
With Missouri.
No politics.
Let's move along.
If there are other questions regarding these one-time expenses, ask them now. If
Can
not,
go on
Are you
consent?
objecting to consent?
Yeah, that's
Okay. Commissioner Ashcraft would like this on action, so we'll see it there. Thank you very much, Ms. Cairns.
Thank you.
All right, at this point, we'll move on to item number 13, please.
Consider an adjustment to the fare structure for Johnson County Transit's micro-transit service, raising the fare from the current $3 or $5 fare to $5 for the first 5 miles traveled, plus an additional $2 per mile for every mile after, to begin January 1st, 2024.
Josh Powers is here from Transit to discuss this matter. Mr. Powers, welcome back.
Chairman, Commissioners, good afternoon. You may remember that on October 12th, we had a committee of the whole meeting to give you an update on some of the transit pilot projects, and a part of that was seeking direction from the board on our recognizing the need to address overly long trips on microtransit. And we discussed various ways to do that through changing the fare structure. And so I don't know why the map is not showing up on the slide here, but what we're trying to do is move from there it goes. So you can see this is our current service area, and right now the fare is $3 or $5, depending on whether your trip crosses that middle overlapped area. And so as the demand for microtransit continues to be very, very strong, we're seeing a high rate, approximately 40% of trips that are over 10 miles in length. And so providing those long trips for $3 or $5 takes vehicles out of service. We're unable to move people. It increases wait times. So what we are proposing is that the service area remains the same, as you see there. That overlapped area goes away, and the fare structure is changed to be $5 for the first 5 miles with $2 for every mile afterward. And so, for example, if you could imagine a trip from this building to Johnson County Community College, that's a 6.5-mile trip length, that would be, under the new fare structure, a $9 trip. $5 for the first 5 miles and $2 for every mile after. So you'll see that it's 6.5 miles, the half mile doesn't get reduced to $1. It continues to be $2 for every time you exceed a mile. We've done some monitoring of the private sector services, and the same trip would cost approximately between $16 and $25, depending, because obviously those costs change throughout the day based on demand. To look at a longer trip, a ride from this building to the plaza under this new fare structure, 20-mile trip length, it would be a $35 fare. And you could see that the private sector cost for the same trip would be between $30 and $40. So really what we're trying to do is change customer behavior. We have an existing fixed route system that can provide these longer trips. And under this new fare structure, people can utilize microtransit for $5 to get to a fixed route system route so that they can get down to the urban core. So I want to just end by pointing out that the way that we would structure this fare structure change is that we'd implement it for a period of 90 days beginning on January 1st, 2024. And our current contract structure is such that we contract on a per-hour basis with our vendor, WHC. So that means we pay $41 per vehicle per hour so that appropriate number of vehicles can be out in the field. As we said, the fare changes to $5 for the first 5, $2 for every mile after, and that fare revenue comes to Johnson County to offset the cost of service provision. However, if after the first quarter of 90 days, we have not reduced demand and long trips and the costs associated with those long trips, we would, behind the scenes, amend our contract with WHC to move to a per-trip basis and limit our county subsidy to $10 per trip. The fare structure remains the same for the customer, $5 plus $2 for every mile after the first 5. The fare revenue then goes to WHC. Why is that important? Because they are independent contractors, and if they are not offering them an hourly rate appropriate to keep their interest, they can decline those trips, and then our ability to provide any service goes down dramatically. So what we really have here is a phase one, phase two to ensure that we're meeting our cost reduction metrics. Additional options at that point could be consideration of trip capping, which is basically you say, hey, look, we've got a budget and we have to stick to it. And so after we've provided the number of trips that the budget provides for, then we're going to stop providing trips. And then also in the future, the board could consider a policy discussion around reducing the service area. So with that, I'm happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Josh, and I appreciate kind of the 1-2 step here, consistent with the direction we provided during the committee of the whole. Will you be coming to us after that 90 days and giving us an update on, or is it anticipated that you'd come to us after 90 days and give us an update on whether or not we've been able to meet our target?
Yes.
Commissioner O'Hara?
Oh, thank you. Have we considered increasing the rates after 90 days? And what about needs-based?
So on the first, we would like to try this out and see what happens. Now, that is a policy discussion. As the chairman just mentioned, we come back to give you an update on how it's going. If the direction from the board at that time is to consider higher rates, that's certainly something that staff would do. As far as needs-based, this is a premium service, and that's how it was designed to be. So when we had fares on fixed routes, we did have a reduced rate for folks based on income. This is construed as a premium service. So at this point, there is no reduced rate based on income, although that's something that has been raised by the commission and we can certainly explore.
So we still are subsidizing this substantially.
Well, we are subsidizing, yes.
And this is a premium service. It's not based on needs.
That's correct.
And we are competing directly with the private sector.
We are not competing with the private sector because we are utilizing a private vendor. I mean, this is a private sector service that's.
Well, I know, but if there's a vendor out there that does not work for the county, we are competing against because we are subsidizing those fees. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner Allen Brand?
Thank you, Chair. Well, you know, it sucks if you live out in the unincorporated area or even into Gardner Edge, and so you're paying more for the trips, which I don't like that, but I totally, I'm understanding what you're doing. And most people that use this service, it's because they either don't have a car or they can't afford to do any other. So I don't know that it's 100% accurate that it's not people that need it, because most people prefer to drive their own car. But I was also, and this is off subject, but I was wondering if maybe later or the first of the year, I've sent a couple of emails trying to get a list of the routes that are going to be stopped, because I really want to go out and meet with those people. And so sometime, I know you've probably been busy, either that or I have a wrong email. If you could get with me, I'd appreciate it.
We'll make sure you get what you need.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ashcraft?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, Mr. Powers, thank you. You're trying to respond reasonably to market forces. I maybe question if the 90-day window is adequate, but if you feel it is, that I'm not going to object. I look forward to you offering us some feedback. I do think Commissioner O'Hare raises a valid point about a premium service versus targeted to, and that may be the subject worthwhile to pursue later.
I think definitely a topic that we'll need to continue to discuss as we go through the strategic planning process for how we'll provide transit services in the future for Johnson County. Commissioner Fast?
Is there a model for those, who are 100 or 200% of poverty in microtransit across the country?
There are systems that do that. There's really a wide array of ways to offer this service, and it just comes down to where the board feels the appropriate level of subsidy is.
Well, I mean, I just, the data in my district, the numbers that go to the Walmart on 135th, most likely those are employees, people who, there's no access to fixed routes. So it's not like they can be routed to fixed route in many areas of our county. So I don't know, when you develop topics for that strategic plan, that really needs to be looked at, because, we have so many transit deserts, and, we're building this new building, probably, I don't know if that will pass, but, in Olathe, and transit is terrible in that area. So I really think we've got to look at people who are our retail workers, our workforce. We have 10% of the county who do not have a car.
I agree with you, Commissioner, and we'll be happy to discuss any and all transit options throughout the strategic planning process.
Objections to consent on this one? Okay, we'll see it there. Josh, thank you very much, sir. Item 14, please.
Consider adopting the 2024 Johnson County Federal Legislative Platform.
Mark Dapp, welcome back.
Mark Dapp, Budget and Financial Planning. This is the adoption of the federal platform that was reviewed at the Committee of the Whole last Thursday. This does include the revisions that were proposed by the Commission at that time, most notably a reference to the Inflation Reduction Act and the direct pay provisions within our core principles, and also including the language for the remediation of the Sunflower Ammunition Site within the Panasonic Development section. Those were the two changes that were recommended by the Commission last week, and that is what's reflected in the draft of the 24 federal platform.
Thank you, sir. Questions? Commissioner Ashcraft?
Mr. Dapp, I have not had a chance to review either, so before next week, let me review, and if we could meet and visit.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Consent.
I'm seeing a no there. Why I would agree, we'll keep this on action on the federal legislative platform. Thank you, Mr. Dapp. And what about number 15, please?
Consider adopting the 2024 Johnson County State Legislative Platform.
So, very similar. This reflects the recommendations from the Commission made at the Committee of the Whole last week. Most notably, we have added the new action agenda priority as it relates to the representation on the KCATA board. There is also language that has been added about Good Samaritan laws and our support for those in the 24 legislative session. The sections that related to housing have been reorganized and grouped together pursuant to the board direction. And those are the changes that were recommended by the Commission that are reflected in the 24 version of the state platform.
Thank you, Mr. Dapp. Questions regarding this item? Will remain on action. Okay, we'll see it there. Thank you, Mr. Dapp.
If I can just do one plug for our county legislative delegation reception next Wednesday at 3:30 at Meadowbrook Park. I just wanted to serve as a friendly reminder to all of the commissioners.
Thank you all for attending if you're available. And item number 16, please.
Consider approval of a real estate purchase contract with MAA Krupa Lenexa LLC to purchase the properties located at 9461 Lenexa Drive and 9471 Lenexa Drive, Lenexa, Kansas 66215, at a price not to exceed $6 million, plus up to an additional $500,000 for due diligence activities to be funded through coronavirus SLFRF received from the United States Department of Treasury.
Peg Trent, Chief Legal Counsel, is here to discuss this item. Welcome back.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. This item is for your consideration, a real estate purchase agreement for a piece of property located in Lenexa. This property would hopefully be utilized for a homeless services facility, and specifically the terms of the deal involves the purchase of the property for $6 million, which would be your SLRFR funds that would be utilized. This particular property is currently being utilized as La Quinta Hotel. There is 2 buildings that are located on this property. One was a former restaurant for Denny's, along with the hotel. At this point, the terms of the purchase agreement are that there is a period of time of due diligence, if you will, of investigating the viability of utilizing this buildings for the purpose of a homeless service facility. And that would include not only looking at the building as environmentally and to the property condition and inspection, but it also would include potentially negotiating a franchise agreement to remove that from the La Quinta at that particular location. As part of this purchase agreement, There are certain benchmarks, if you will, of compliance of hard money that would go towards the seller as we move along in this process of 270 days. The total amount for the first 90 days would be $1,000. At 180 days would be another $100,000, and then at closing would be obviously the 150, so a total of $350,000. At any point during this 270 days, at any of these due diligence, which Mr. Connors will get into more detail, and also some of the mechanisms that are going to be parallel of this purchase, during that time period, we are able to rescind, if you will, and what we will lose at that point of this agreement is any of that hard money. The hard money, if we are successful in getting to the 270 days, that all goes to the purchase price. In addition, this item, we are requesting another $500,000. That's for the due diligence, the costs and overhead that it costs to have the appraiser, the environmental studies, and all of the other studies and requirements that we are making. One major item within this process, this building is located in the city of Lenexa, which does have city ordinance addressing these type of shelters, that there would be an application process for a special use permit to operate as a homeless services facility. There will be an RFP process paralleling this in the 270 in order to secure someone to potentially own, manage and maintain that particular building, as well as looking at someone who can and/or will provide services during that time period. So I'm going to give that to Joe Connor to further explain that process and to fill in any information that I neglected to provide.
Thank you, Peg. Joe Connor, Assistant County Manager. So Peg has gone over the contract and some of the conditions for the due diligence, and I want to kind of make sure and cover all the rest of them. So part of the due diligence early on is going to be negotiating a buyout of the franchise fees from La Quinta Corporate. The owner has asked us to do that, and we've agreed to take that on. We've got issues around private appraisals, title review, and we want facilities to really evaluate both properties to understand their condition and usability and what kind of investment it would take to bring them up to some kind of a standard where we can actually operate that as a homeless services center. Peg had mentioned the SUP planning process. That's going to be extensive, but we expect that we can get that done in that 270-day period. And all this is being done through the lens of HUD requirements. So if you recall, we have $3.9 million aside in our home or our HUD funds that could go toward renovations of this particular property. So we have to look at that through the lens of not only what is good standards, what would HUD require us to do to this facility. And then the RFP for the facility owner / operator and any service providers that is underway. Now, as far as the development of the RFP, we expect to have that issued in the next week or so, and that competition will be run by United Community Services. And then county staff will have a role in the evaluation process. And one of the things I want to be clear about is that it's our intention to not ever own this facility. If the RFP process is successful, we'll have an owner-operator identified, and then at closing, we will immediately transfer the property to that owner, and that owner will take the facility and run with it. And we are going to ask this facility to have deed restrictions on it that will maintain its use for a 10-year period. So it will be restricted from anything else for a 10-year period if we get to closing. So this is a very exciting development. I'm pretty excited to even get this far, but there are a lot of things that need to be done in a 270-day period. So we're glad to get started and hopefully we can make this happen.
First of all, before I forget to say it, thanks for all the due diligence that has been already undertaken by staff, knowing that the opportunity for a service center like this is a bit of a unicorn, especially given our price point. So thank you to you and to everybody for the efforts. In the next 270 days, assuming this is approved, there's a parallel path of tracks. We're not waiting one on the other. We're moving ahead on both to try to get a lot of work done in 3/4 a year. So Commissioner Myers, you were first hand up.
Thank you, Chair. It's time for a football analogy. We are on the 20-yard line. This is an exciting item, but we are on the 20-yard line, and we're moving forward. But already we have some residents, and I want to reiterate again, this is not going to be a county-run facility. And people are already thinking that and saying that. I've read some messages about that, and I, again, reiterate, this is not going to be a county-run facility.
Thank you. And I guess I should have mentioned our communications plan. We've already launched it. There's a Q&A site. We've got some questions we were anticipating. If that's one, Commissioner Myers, we need to add to the Q&A, we can certainly add that.
Commissioner O'Hara?
Thank you. Is there any other communities that has done something similar, buying the property and transferring it to an operator? Because my concern is that we're going to get ourselves into a similar situation as we did with Evergreen. I know that we never transferred the ownership to Evergreen. However, if we get an operator in there and then they're not successful, we've got $6 million invested, and it's hard for me to think that the county's not going to want to go in and try to revive the project if it falls on its face. This is a huge undertaking, and I'm just wondering if there's a blueprint that has been utilized in other communities, or are we making a new blueprint?
Well, I think there are similar projects that we've come across. None maybe as with our approach, I'm not sure, so we can look into that. And again, I just want to reiterate that there are a lot of things that can happen here, a lot of things that can go wrong, unfortunately, to your point. And so this has to be a really right thing to do with a lot of different steps in the way before we say yes.
And I know that we're having an intense increase in crime, and I mean, we had a smash and grab at Oak Park Mall, and I'm just really concerned that we're going to put pressure on that area. I'm just really concerned. I'm not sure that this is the right area. These folks have a lot of problems. They have a lot of problems, and I can imagine, I don't think Leawood would be really crazy about having it in their backyard, or Prairie Village. So I'm very concerned about this project, and especially the placement. I think our first concern is to do no harm to the community that is there.
Well, there's going to be a lot of due diligence that goes into this, community meetings, neighborhood meetings, city requirements. There are a lot of kind of rungs in the ladder to climb before we get anywhere near saying yes to this facility. And I think that you know, from a research standpoint, I think this property's been something's been looked at in Johnson County for multiple years by folks trying to find the right place. And this one checks a lot of the boxes as far as its remoteless and its location, near transit lines, near the highway. So, I mean, that's kind of where we're at.
So I want to, well, go ahead, Commissioner Allen Brand.
I just wanted to make sure you saw my finger.
I did.
Are you sure? Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you and the staff for all the work they've done. And these people are people that we're going to get help with their needs and get them back into society and back into the workplace. So there's a step process going through when they enter this community. And we just had a bunch of thefts in my neighborhood, so that's happening everywhere. But, so my question is, when you get ready to do, because this is HUD approved, you've got all this, it's one of those, I think the chair says it AAAs, everything has been looked at. So UCS, how do they have the ability to put the RFQs out? I don't know, I'm just asking.
Yeah, so
Because, you know, there are so many, and that's some of the questions I've had asked me, so that's why I'm asking. You know, because this, even though it's a business related
Right.
It needs to run as a business.
The RFP itself has been developed with our staff and with UCS, so it's
Okay.
going to be a very robust RFP that meets kind of our standards for issuing one. United Community Services is the best organization to administer this because of their work with homeless populations for a number of years through the continuum of care. They've been our HUD designated agency to do the point in time counts, and they have the network of providers in the continuum of care. And so they're the ones with the kind of the boots on the ground to try to rally the service providers to come around this and see who steps forward. And so that was kind of our thought process. It's again a pretty robust RFP, but handed over to UCS to run the competition.
Okay, because there's a lot out there, so I could see where they would have multiple different services in and out of that building. Thank you.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I've got a lot of questions about this issue, both the granular issues as well as the substantive broad issues. The challenge is the SLRF funds go away January 31st of 2024. So if we don't have a deal, however we define a deal, before then, that $6 million or $7 million, whatever it is that we want to spend to acquire the facility is not there. Then we would have to use auxiliary funds or some other funding source and start this monopoly game all over again. So that's real pressure, okay? And I know we can debate whether or not we want to use federal funds, but it is an unusual, if not unique, opportunity. I've never seen the federal government dole out money like they did. So we either leverage it for this or something else. And this is an issue that's been hovering for many years, arguably growing. And I've talked to several law enforcement officials, including the sheriff this morning, as a matter of fact. And the perspective I hear from them is that a facility like this is not necessarily a solution, but it's a tool, an avenue that we have not had in Johnson County before. I mean, many times they end up in jail, or they leave them on the street, or they take them to some mental health facility, which, as we know, has become less and less available. So this is an opportunity, arguably, to help locate a certain segment of our population to provide them a way out of their circumstance, okay? Now, that's easy to talk about, but the practicality of it, and Commissioner O'Hare is right, I just don't want Johnson County government to be in the business of managing and worrying about this organization, not just short-term, but long-term. And it's not exactly evergreen, but Commissioner O'Hare, I had kind of the same reaction. I don't want some future commission to look back and say, what were they thinking back then? And that's what I felt. So how do we deal with it? Well, I'm supportive of continuing the conversation. I've got more questions, but here's what I'm struggling with, and I have a request, Mr. Chairman. If we proceed with this, one of the things that I'm hearing, and I think they're valid concerns, I have not begun to process them yet, but we've been working on this kind of behind closed doors and quietly for quite some time, and there have been interests out there working on it in different capacities. But the general public, I think, probably was not really aware of this. It was just not on the radar until a couple of days ago. So it's like, surprise, here it is, where it's going to be, and what it's going to look like by some imagination versus what the reality is. And there's a disconnect. And unfortunately, I hate to say that with the habitat issue still fresh in my mind, that disconnect between, well, what was said and who knew what when, it's left a bit of bitterness in kind of how we deal with that process. And while I think we should pursue this, the double track, I don't disagree with, but I'd like to add a third track so that we can say we've made this effort, and it's part of the communications plan, and maybe this is already included, but I would like to ask that we add a CAL in which we have a full discussion to lay out the issues that we're dealing and how we're going to approach it, so it can be attended by the press and the media and whoever wants to, and have a full understanding. And we don't have all the answers, but I'd rather have us have that transparency step as early as possible. And that won't stop us from doing any of these other steps, because there still is the due diligence going on in other issues which may kill it, but at least it gives an opportunity to put it out there and have a substantive, rational, extensive conversation, rather than just trying to talk about it at the tail end of the last meeting of the year before the end of those funds expire. So that's my request, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, and I certainly think we could recap all the activities that have led us to this point. I mean, there was the study that was funded. You guys set aside money publicly for a homeless shelter, I think it was called, or non-congregate shelter at that time, so that was publicly done. I mean, we've had a lot of, so we can certainly recap that information. That's not a...
I know, I mean, it can all be done, but it's just doing it and making that effort is my point.
Thank you, Commissioner Fast.
Yeah, the 10-year timeframe, you know, low-income tax credits are 15 and they're pushing to 20. 10 years for, you know, allocating that much money, I mean, are we going to get first right of refusal on PEG? I mean, 10 is really not very long in the HUD housing world.
Chair and Commissioners, we are working out that detail about the deed restriction and how that would look in ensuring that the facility will continue to run in the way that it's intended in order to be consistent with the HUD funding. So we have thought that through, have given thought to how that would look. Right now, we are putting that together in our documents for the RFP so that would, when the person who is the proposer is coming forward with a proposal, they'll have those transparency as to what would be required of them under HUD.
It's still 10 years. Do we have first right of refusal?
We could, yes.
I mean, 'cause 10
absolutely. We've been
years-
looking at it in various ways, a reverter clause, which we don't want the building back, but various ways of refusal that we may use the building for other ways, or other ways we can still ensure. I've had experience in other state on how to handle this, and it's worked very well and over a 10-year period, and how we had benchmarks and how we were able to look at it. And it was a different fund than federal funding that we're looking at, but it was economic funds, and how we made sure that there was compliance and there was an issue, and how we were able to come forward and still keep that project moving to successful outcomes with the property. So we're going to try and implement some of those items within the RFP.
Jay maybe know this better, but it will need a CUP by Lenexa, and with that special use COP, they will have to notify all the neighbors or have a neighborhood meeting. Is that correct?
I can address that,
Oh, you can? Okay.
Commissioner. Yes, it's a special use permit that we would have to make application. It's part of our process that we have charted out.
We will have to have a hearing then.
Let me,
Neighborhood
no,
meeting.
No, no,
Let's let her
Lenexa,
finish.
let me explain. That process involves that the county will assist with funding of a outside consultant to help whoever was selected as the owner-operator from the RFP to apply for the permitting process through the city of Lenexa for a special use permit. As part of the special use permit, there are requirements of notice requirements. It's 200 feet. Unfortunately or fortunately, it does not go beyond because of the location, which is a good location for this type of facility. It does not include much residential. However, we are intending to notify residential areas and surrounding areas.
Thank you.
And there are other requirements that will be made, and site plans and other proposals. So all of that's being looked at, put together, has been charted out by staff in order to make sure we meet those deadlines as we parallel track the purchase and the due diligence period of this purchase agreement.
I understand that everybody's got their hand up again, and that's fine. I'll stay here as long as you want. But at this point, let's maybe ask staff for the additional information that we'll need for next week for that vote. So if that's something we could focus on right now, I'd appreciate it. Commissioner Ellen Brand?
Thank you, Chair. With respect, you can put that list together, because this has been so transparent. Maybe not the purchase of the location, but it's going to be pretty easy to go back and look at all the work that's been done in the subcommittee, and the staff, and everybody came together at the table. All the people that are involved, 1010, all those people came together. So we have been transparent, just not about the location.
And Commissioner Allenbrand, what an excellent point. And just standing here, I thought of it. We could place all those items up on the website with our Q&A so that they can see the timeline along with those documents. We did something similar to that with other planning projects, so we can probably set that up. So thank you for that
We even did a
suggestion.
public, Commissioner Hanslick did it, a public presentation of the findings from all those entities.
Yeah, we can go back a few years and put that up.
Okay, thank you.
I apologize, Commissioner Hanslick. You had not had an opportunity to talk on this one yet. Why don't you go ahead?
Oh, well, thank you. I just wanted to briefly say, this is a very exciting and I think very pivotal moment for our county. We can choose to step out and in faith, basically, knowing we don't know exactly what's going to happen. I think the staff has done an incredible job of trying to answer and look at every possibility, but there are unknowns that we can't control. And so we have a choice to either take this opportunity or to reject it and continue to have nothing to give to the folks in our community who are without housing. I've had the opportunity lately to work with some business people who are concerned because there have been people who are homeless who are kind of hanging out in their stores and near their businesses because they have nowhere else to go. And they have asked, why doesn't the county provide a place where folks could go and get mental health treatment and get the kind of help they need? Because right now, there's nowhere for them to go. And so I think this is really a moral obligation we have to care for our fellow Johnson Countyans who don't have a place to live. I think it's really important also that we recognize that people who are homeless are no more likely to be perpetrate violent crimes than anybody else in society. In fact, people living on the streets without a home are much more likely to be victims of violent crime themselves. So instead of looking at this as, this could potentially increase violent crime, let's look at it, it's a chance to reduce violent crime because we're helping people get off the street and be less likely to be a victim. I've said this before and I don't want to go on about it, but I've been through the process of creating a homeless shelter out of a hotel, and it can be done, and very successfully. And so I have great hope for this project, and I think we've built in as many safety nets as we possibly can. And one of the important things that I've mentioned before is that in addition, we have to also continue to develop transitional housing, permanent supportive housing, because we have to make sure there's housing for people to go to after this emergency shelter. So I just think it's really important to keep all that in perspective. This is an incredible opportunity we have to utilize this money to make an enormous difference in Johnson County.
Thank you. Very quickly, the SLFRF funds, the point that Commissioner Ashcraft brought up, are those have to be spent within what time frame?
Through the end of 2024.
The end of 2023?
2024. I think Commissioner Ashcraft said.
No.
Okay.
He said January 31st, 2024. I think he meant.
December 31st.
And if I
Okay.
could,
January.
Okay.
23.
Okay, so this, that was a confusion, and I think that my concern is that we have a program that is a hand up, so that these folks can be reintegrated into society, but I just have some real concerns about the location. Thank you.
So I appreciate that this is a big step for Johnson County. And with that comes the need, concern, some amounts of hesitation because it is new, and will require diligence, inquiry, and maybe even radical communication. But what I want to make sure that we don't do is start utilizing tropes against our fellow Johnson Countyans. Sheriff and I had a conversation on Monday, said crime's down, and that's great. When we talk about these people not being part of our society or get them into society, they are very much part of society. People who find themselves unhoused are our brothers and our sisters. And I agree with Commissioner Ashcraft, this is a growing problem. Our point-in-time count is up double digits in Johnson County. There is very much a need here. So when we talk about these folks, or we marginalize or demonize, I want us to be very careful about that, because I think we're judged by how we treat the most vulnerable in our community, and we should be. And so when we're out there advocating our position on this one way or another, I want us to be honest and forthright. We're going to do our very best at this county to provide great communication and honest, truthful, factual information about this. And I would ask my fellow elected officials to stick to that information and let this be really a policy discussion as opposed to a demonization of people. So I look forward to the continued conversation here. And again, thank you to staff for their work on this. That's the last item that I have on the agenda. So we're going to go ahead and adjourn. Thank you all for your patience today, and we'll see you next week. Thank you. We're adjourned.